Hello and welcome to a new video. My name is Samer, I work in data analytics, and in this project video, I'm going to show you how you can build a Yelp review scraper all on your own using R. Now, of course, if you come from another background like Python, you could apply the same logic as well here, so in some sense you could follow along. But this is going to be a great video to show you that you can scrape reviews from any restaurant or any business on Yelp and put it in a nice data frame. So the goal of this is to be able to scrape the data and then put it in a nice, neat data frame which gives us information on the user, the location of the review, the date of the review, the text of the review, the rating of the review, and some other features as well. So we are going to be looking at a specific restaurant in the Dallas area called Son of a Butcher, which is a burger spot. So we're using that as an example for today. So let's go ahead and jump straight into the code. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with building the scraper. First, we're going to have to load in all of the necessary libraries. So I'm going to highlight them and run them. Next, it's time to load in the URL. So I have the URL open in here. And one of the things that I want to bring to your attention is that I actually changed the sorting order. And that's because the default sorting order was giving problems in terms of giving me duplicate reviews. So just make sure that you change the sorting of the order just from this drop down over here. So I'm just going to take this URL, copy it, and paste it in here. Then I'm going to create a page object which will store that content as HTML contents from the URL. So I'm going to run that. Okay, great. Now we have the HTML code, so now we can get started with scraping the specific elements. So I want to start off by scraping the username of each review. So there should be a maximum of 10 reviews per page. So since we're on the first page, this should have 10 reviews. So I'm going to right click on this right here and click on inspect. Then I'm going to highlight the name, and I'm going to look carefully at it. Now it seems that this is all sitting within an A tag. It has an ambiguous class name, so I don't know if we could necessarily use that. But the href tag actually starts with a /user_details, which could be very useful for us. However, all of this is sitting within a div tag. And this div tag has a unique class name which starts with user passport. So I think we can use that to our advantage when we're scraping. So what I'll do is I will go back here and I will create a object called usernames, and I'm going to set that equals to page, and then I'm going to pipe that into an HTML elements function, which is a function that comes from the rvest package. In here you actually can pass in whether you have to pass in the HTML element itself, and then you can actually pass in whether you want to look for the element based on the CSS method or the XPath method. For this entire video we will be using the XPath method. I believe it's a really great way of identifying elements. So what I'll do is that since this is sitting in a div class, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a double slashes div. And what that means is look within the entire document for all the div tags. And then what I want to look here for is that I'm concerned, I only want to know, look for all the div classes, actually over here, look for all the div classes that start with user passport. So I'm not really concerned with all these other bits of the text. So we can actually do that by using the starts with method within the XPath. And the starts with is particularly referring to a class. So it's the class attribute. And the class attribute starts with user passport. So I want to look at that, which says, so it's a space user-passport. So user-passport. Then we can close that right there, and then close it, and then put a quotation. Great. So if we were to actually run this and look at it over here, it's actually going to pull in all those user passport. But that's not what we necessarily need. What we need is actually the names. So we need to go down another level, and we need to go into the A tag. So in order to do that, I'm just going to type in HTML elements XPath equals to And before I put a slash slash, I'm actually going to put a dot and a period and then a slash slash. What this means is look within that previous element. So we're looking for all of the A tags within the previous element that have a where the href tag, so that starts with href, starts with user details, user underscore details. And then we can close that, close that. So if we were to run this, it's going to give us 10 elements. And we're not really interested with the HTML itself. We're just interested in the text of those elements. So we're just going to pipe that into an HTML text function. So when I run that and I look at the usernames, we have the usernames. We have all 10 usernames, and it matches with what we have on here. Excellent. So now let's go and scrape the, let's see. Let's go ahead and scrape the locations. So I'm going to go ahead and also look at the inspect, and I'm going to click on the location. The location is sitting within a div tag, but also I think we can actually just use the same thing where we're looking at it within the passport tag. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I will just simply copy paste this code over here, and I'm going to do it for locations, and I'm just going to paste it. And the thing here we have is after we're looking within the text, we can notice that the location is sitting within a span tag, and the span tag, the only thing that's identifying that span tag is a class name of this. So we're just going to have to use this class name and see if we can help us identify the text for the location. So if I go into HTML elements, xpath equals to period, span, where the class name is equal to this right here. So if we were to run this, it's giving us those locations. So let me go ahead and actually look at the text over here for this. If I were to run this, we can see that it actually gives us all the locations. But the only problem here is that it actually, for whatever reason, it's actually dragging in the location and adding it as part of the location, so just the location text. I don't want that specific one, so what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to pipe that in, and then I'm going to use a period, and then I'm going to use another period, not equals to location. And what that does is we're just simply piping in all of this vector, and we're just saying, give me all the values that are not equal to location. So if I were to run all of that, it's going to give me 10 values of all the locations, which match the order that is on here as well. So let me go ahead and run that so it's stored in the locations. Excellent. Now I want to go ahead and actually for this one, I want to try and scrape the review itself, the actual content. So I'm going to right click on here, click on inspect, and then I'm going to click on the text itself. Now, of course, all of this is sitting within a review block right here. So this is something that we can use to our advantage. So because we're only interested in the text that's sitting within those review blocks. So that would be a div class. And same as our previous ones, there is a pattern that we can use where it starts with review. So that's a great way of identifying it. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to call this comments, and I'm going to set it equals to page and then pipe into HTML elements where the xpath is equal to / div, where it starts with class and space review. Close the parentheses and then close the bracket. So of course, if we were to run this, it's going to give us all the 10 review blocks on here. So now let's go ahead and extract those comments. So by doing that, we're going to pipe it in, and we want to identify those comments. So if you actually scroll through this, you're going to notice that the comment is actually sitting within a p tag, and then that p tag has a class that starts with comment. So again, we can use that to our advantage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say HTML elements xpath equals to period // and then we're going to say p starts with class, and then the class starts with comment. Okay, now if we were to run this, let's see what it gives us. The problem here is that I'm seeing 15 comments, although we have 10 reviews. So let's look at why this is happening. The reason why this is happening is because on this page, if you notice, for some of these reviews, you're getting a reply from the manager or the owner of that business. So it's actually extracting these as comments, because if we were to actually look at this comment right here, we're going to notice that this as well is also a p tag, which has the same class name. So we need to find a way to not consider those. And since this p tag is also sitting within that review tag, the div review tag over here that we identified, we can find a way to actually just extract the first comment from that review block. And the way to do that is we just need to enclose our XPath on the second line with parentheses, like that, and we want to reference the first index. So if we were to run that, it's only going to give us 10. So what this means is it's looking for that first instance of comment that is sitting within the review div tag. So if we were to go and get the text of this, and we run it, we're going to notice that it picks up 10 reviews. So right here, the last one is the 10th review, and it's only picking up the user reviews and not the business owner reviews or comments. So I'm just going to run all of that and store it in the comments object. I'm going to apply the same thing to the ratings. So of course we need to obtain the ratings as well. So it would be these stars. And the way to do that is I'm going to right click on inspect, and I'm going to click on this as a whole. And what I need to do now is I need to try and locate the rating. So of course all of this is sitting within the review block. So we want to start off by taking this code, and then I'm going to paste it in here, and I'm going to change this to ratings. And we have page HTML elements. Okay, that's fine. And now we need to go and find this rating block if we can. So if we look over here, we need to see if we can find this. So it looks like it's this one. So right here we have a div tag, and that div tag, what helps us a lot is we have an ARIA label, which includes whatever the rating is and then the text star rating. So let me see if that's applicable to another review. Maybe let me see if I can find a lower level review. Oh yeah, look right there. There's a 1-star review over there. And then if I were to look at this, let me see if I can find the ARIA label for this one. Right there. So we have that ARIA label right here, and it says 1-star rating. So I think what we're trying to find here is that there's that sense of consistency where we're trying to find the tag that has rating in it, basically. So I think this is enough for us to help us identify that element. So in order to do that, let's go ahead and continue with this code and type in HTML elements XPath equals to period // and it's a div. And what we're going to do is, instead of saying starts with, we're going to say contains. And the reason why we say contains is because we don't have, it's not starting with the word star rating. That's not the start of it. So we need to look at it within the text. So we're looking for the text within that ARIA label tag, or the ARIA label attribute, sorry, where it contains star rating, because that is what is in that ARIA label. So I'm going to close that and close that over here. And then also for safety's sake, I will also apply the same logic to the previous piece of code, where I'm only going to extract the first instance of the review rating, just so that I'm making sure I'm extracting each one for each customer. So if I were to run this, it's going to give me also 10, which is a good sign, because that's what we're looking for. And let's see what happens if I try to extract the text from this. So if I were to try and extract the text, it just gives me a bunch of blanks. And that's because the star rating is actually sitting within the ARIA label, so it's not really a text itself. So how do we obtain this value over here that's sitting within this tag that is equal to the ARIA label attribute? Well, there's actually a method called HTML attribute, which allows you to specify a value of which attribute you're looking at. So in this case, I'm looking for the ARIA label. And if I were to run this, it's actually going to give me all of those pieces of text that I was looking for, because with this method, it's telling you to pull in all the data that is equal to the ARIA label attribute. Now the problem here is I don't want all of the text which says star rating, star rating. I'm only interested in the number. And what I'm going to do in here is I'm just simply going to pipe this into a str remove all function, where I am removing the star rating. So if I were to run this, it's going to show me all those numbers. And last but not least, since I want to do some computations to these numbers in the future, I want to store them as numbers. So I'm just going to say as numeric. So if we just run this, you're going to notice that they're all numbers now. And I'm just going to run it to save it in there. Okay, now let's go ahead and extract those review dates. So if I were to click on one of the dates in here, one of the good things we notice is that the date is also sitting within those review blocks. And then the date is also sitting within a span class, just how it was with the location, and it has a specific class name. So I'm going to take that and use it to our advantage. But first I can actually copy this code because it's looking within the review block. And I'm just going to change this to the dates. And what I'm going to do next here is I'm just going to say HTML elements. I'm going to say xpath equals to period / span, and I am going to look for the class that is equals to this right here. So I'm just going to take that class name, copy it, and paste it. And then just to be on the safe side, I'm also going to enclose this within parentheses and make sure that I am pulling in the first instance of this. So I'm just going to say close the parentheses over here and then 1. And then let me just go ahead and get the HTML text. And then if I were to run all of this, it actually gets me all of those date reviews. Excellent. So now we could actually use this to our advantage, and maybe we can actually convert this into a date, but I'll leave it as is for now. So I'm just going to run this and store it in the dates object. Okay. Last but not least, we're coming to try and see if we can extract these attributes of each review, where it says useful, funny, and cool. So I want to know if I can extract those numbers where it's, how many people find this useful, how many people find it funny, how many people find it cool. If there is a number, that means like one, in this case, one person found this useful. But if there are no numbers, then that means that 0 people found this funny or 0 people found this cool. So let's go ahead and try and do that. So I'm going to create an object called extra info, where I'm going to set it equals to the page. And then I'm also going to take this bit of the text right here because we're looking within the review block as well. But let's see if we can try and identify these. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this and see if I can click on this block over here and see if it tells me anything. So these are button types. I guess that could be useful in a sense. But let me see if I can find something else here. So this is all sitting within div tag. So I would prefer this one because it's actually looking at all 3 categories at once. So this div class actually starts with arrange unit. So perhaps I can use that to my advantage. But let me see. Let me try actually and see if I can actually extract the button over here as well and see if I can just extract the text from there based on that button. So let me just say HTML elements xpath equals to period / button, and then the type was equals to submit. And then let me see if that can help get me something. So it gave me all these buttons, and then let me see if I actually look at the text. And if I look at the text in here, it just has a lot of it has some empty strings in here that they're not necessarily, I don't believe they're necessarily useful in here. So, and then we have a bunch of read mores as well. So I think what we could do is, let's see if we can remove those. So I'm just going to say period, and then period where it's not equals to blank. So if we were to run that, it removes all of the blanks. And then also I want to remove all the read mores. So I'm also going to pipe this in and just say period not equals to read more. So if I run that, so it actually narrows it down, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Okay, great. So I think this is what we're looking for because each review is supposed to have 3. So 1 useful, 1 funny, 1 cool. So it all adding up to 30 actually does make sense. Okay, this is great. So this is exactly what I am looking for over here. But the problem here is, again, we need to extract the number from here. And then in this case, what I want to do is I want to make sure that I'm extracting these properly. So I want to make sure that the number I'm extracting here is for the useful and not for the funny. So we could go ahead and try to come up with a method of doing this. So here separately, I'll just make sure I store this all in the extract info. I'm going to create, well, I'm actually going to use the str extract function. And I'm going to pass in the extra info, which is the vector containing all of these. And then I am going to see if I can, so let's say I want to look for the useful. So let's say I want to look for the useful, so that would be, let me do like a paste 0 function here. And then let's say I want to say useful. And then I want to paste this, or actually not the paste, I don't need the paste just yet. I could just say useful. So anything that contains useful, and then it just has a bunch of things after it. So this is just the regex way of saying as long as it contains, well, starts with useful and then contains anything else. So that could be a series of space, numbers, etc. And then what I want to do is I want to pass this into a dot Oh, well, actually, let me see. Let me just try and run that and see what it gives me. So it gives me all the ones that say useful, which is what I'm looking for, and then anything that does not contain useful is NAs. So I want to remove the NAs, so I just want to say S, or in this case, I just want to say period, where is.na, it's not equal to is.na, just like that. So if I were to run it, it's going to give me all of the useful ones. So this is great. And then what I want to do is I want to extract the numbers from these. So in order to do that, I'm going to pipe this into an str extract, and I want it to look for a number pattern. So in this case, it's going to be D, and then I want to add a plus sign. So what that means is this could mean extracting one number or more, because in this case, I mean, someone could leave like 10, maybe 10 people find the review useful. So in that case, I want to be able to pull the 1 and the 0 and not just the 1. So if I were to run all this, it's actually going to give me all of the instances where they do have numbers, and then the ones that are NA, the ones that don't have numbers are returned as NAs. So what I want to do here is I don't want to remove those NAs, but instead I want to replace them with zeros. So I'm going to use the str replace NA function, and I'm going to set that equals to string 0. And that is going to help us replace these NAs with the string 0. And the reason why I'm using string 0 and not the actual 0 is because in the previous step, these numbers were already identified as strings, so I want to make sure that they're all the same format. And now that they're all the same format, I can convert all of them into a numeric. Excellent. There we go. So now this is great, but the only thing here is I need to do this for the useful, and then I need to do this for the funny, and then the cool. So what we could do here is actually we can store this in a function. So I'm going to create a function here, and I'm going to call it extra info extract. And I'm going to set it equals to a function where the first parameter would be the extra info variable, and the second parameter would be the text. And the text here would represent basically this useful or funny or cool. So I'm going to open up curly brackets in here, and I am going to replace this with EI. And then for the useful over here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say paste 0 to where I am first going to just look at the text, and then I am going to append that period and asterisk next to it. So I want to make sure that is in place like that. And I'm going to take all of this and I'm going to put it into that function. So I'm going to run that function. So now that's great. So now what we could do is we could just set a variable for each one, like an object for each one. So I'm just going to call this useful, and I'm going to set it equals to that function, which is extra info extract, where I'm passing in extra info, and then I'm passing in useful, and then I'm going to do this for the funny and cool. So I'm just going to do this for funny and cool. Oops. Funny and cool. So we have those. So if I were to run the useful, for example, and then look at the output there, we have the useful, and then same thing with the funny, where we have the reviews that are found funny, and then for the cool, we click on cool, run it, and then we have all the reviews that show the cool numbers in them as well. Okay, great. So now we have everything we need for all the reviews, and now it's time to put this all in that data frame set. So I'm going to create a temporary object called dfNew, and I'm going to give it a list. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding in the information. So I'm going to add username equals to the usernames that we identified here at the top. Then the dates would be equal to the dates. Then location is going to be equal to user locations. I believe that was what it was, or no, it's actually just locations. That was from a previous example that I was doing. Rating would be equal to ratings. Comment would be equal to comments. Useful would be equal to useful. Funny would be equal to funny. And then cool would be equal to cool. So this is essentially just building this list, an empty list, and we're going to use this to append the data to it and then convert it into a data frame. So I'm going to create this object called dfNewTable, and I'm going to call it as data frame, where I'm converting that dfNew into a data frame. And then last but not least, I want to create I want to reference the dfFinal, which is that object we created early on, or looks like actually we did not create the dfFinal. So actually I need to reference that. So the dfFinal is where we want to store all of our scraped reviews in one data set. So it's actually just going to be an empty list for now. And then I am going to use the rbind list function, and I'm going to pass in the list function to where I'm passing in the dfFinal, and then I'm passing in the dfNewTable. So then I run that, and then there we have it. So if we look at the dfFinal right now, so view dfFinal, we're going to see that we have all of the scraped reviews from the first page in a data set. Now, the trick here is we want to do this for all the pages. So one thing we need to do here is we need to go back and we need to know how many pages are on this site. So if I look over here and then I right click on the pages, it turns out that we have 28 in here. So I need to be able to extract that number. So if I look at the number over here, for example, let me see if I can identify anything. So I want to find a way to just uniquely identify this. And it turns out that actually looking at this div class, the class name starts with pagination, or even the aria label starts with pagination. So perhaps we can actually use that to our advantage to identify these elements. So I'm going to try that. So right here, somewhere at the top, before everything, I actually want to create an object called pageNums, and I'm going to set that equals to page, and then I'm going to pipe it into an HTML elements function, and then I'm going to set the XPath equals to / div, I believe it was a div tag, where the aria label is just equals to pagination navigation. So where the aria label is equal to pagination navigation. So if I were to, let's see if I can actually get the text from here first. So HTML text. So if I were to run that, it's going to give me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1 of 28. Now this is the number that we're concerned with, is the of 28, because that is the number of iterations or the number of pages that we need to look at. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say str extract, and we just want to extract where it says of, and then I'm just going to put a space, and then I'm going to just say d and then plus. So I'm just going to say of a number. It could be one number or more. So if I were to run that, it's going to pull of 28. And then what I'm going to try and do after that is I'm just going to say str remove of. We don't need the of. And then, of course, converting all of this into a numeric. So if I were to run all of this, it's going to give me 28, which is exactly what I'm looking for. And I'll store this in the pageNums. Okay, great. So how does this help us? So let me try and click through the next pages and see how that changes the URL. So if I click through the URL, if you notice, it changes in this portion of the review of the URL, where after the Yelp URL, there's a question mark and it says start equals to 10. So start equals to 10 represents the second page. So if I go to the third page, it's 20. And then if I go to the fourth page, it's 30, and so on and so forth. So we need to find a way to actually include that. So what can we do here? I think what we could do here is we can create some type of sequence off of this. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a new object called page sequence. And I'm going to set this equals to the sequence function. And I'm going to start it at 0. Because if you actually change this to a 0, what it's going to do is it's actually going to take you to the very first page of your reviews. So we can use that to our advantage. So we want to start it from 0. And we want to say 2 equals to page nums multiplied by 10 minus 10. So if we look at this page nums times 10, that's going to make it 280. And the reason we don't want it to be, we're doing the minus 10 is because the last page is supposed to be 270 and not 280. So that's why that's the case. And we want to increment this all by 10. So we want to make sure the sequence goes from 0, 10, 20, 30. So if we were to run all of this, it's going to give us that same sequence. So I'm just going to run that. Wonderful. And now we can start getting to the final pieces of this. And the final piece of this is we will need to put all of our code that we did over here into some kind of loop. So what I want to do is I want to say for I in page sequence. And then, whoops, I need to use the curly brackets. And then I'm going to take all of this code right here. And I'm going to paste it in here. And then what I want to do here is, it's essentially what I did here at the top, where I was reading in the URL. But in this case, we need to make a couple of changes to our URL because now it actually contains that number in here that we need to account for. So that would be like right here, the start equals 2. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to take these bits, I'm going to copy them, and I'm going to paste them at the top of this for loop. And what I'm going to go and do here is, instead of the URL being just a string, I'm going to pass it into a sprintf function, which will allow me to place a placeholder within the string and choose what that format of it is. So in this case, I want to, let's say I actually just take the link from here to use it as a template. And I just want to simply replace this with a %d. And that is going to, I want to use that as a placeholder for the value of I. So each iteration of page sequence, I want it to go within here. And then I want to pass in the I over there. So let's say I set I equals to 10 as an example. And if I were to run that sprintf, it's going to give you that URL. And it's going to say start equals to 10, which is exactly what I'm looking for. Okay, so now that we are done with this, there's one final step. Now, since we're scraping a lot of pages, we want to make sure that we are respecting the servers on Yelp. So what we want to do is we want to be strategic with how we set the code pauses in here. So I'm going to add one final line to the end of the loop, which says sys.sleep sample C15 to 25. And then I'm going to set that right there within the sample. Well, let's just do it over here. 1. So what this means is this is going to generate a random value between 15 to 25. And it's going to use that value as the number of seconds for the code to sleep before it moves on to the next iteration. Now, of course, you could actually make this a smaller range, but I'm only doing this so that I make sure that my IP address is not banned whenever I'm scraping a lot of pages. So let me go ahead and run the df final again so I can clear out that data frame. And let's go ahead and run this for loop. And I will be back once it is complete with running. Okay, so we have now completed the loading and running of all the reviews and putting it in a data frame. So now let's go ahead and look at the data here. So I'm going to type in view. Well, actually, let's type it in here. View df final. And we have all the reviews now sitting in one data frame. Excellent. So now what we could do here is we're just going to say write_CSV, type in the df final, and I'm going to give it a name of sob Yelp reviews.csv. So if I were to, and then if there are any NAs, I'm just going to set those equals to a blank string like that. So if I were to run this, and then go to my working directory, I'm going to see that the data set is in here, and let it load up, making sure that everything's loaded in just fine. And of course, everything is loaded up just like this. Wonderful. This is exactly what I'm looking for. Fantastic. And then you can of course do further data cleaning to this to make sure that everything is in your liking. So maybe you can split out the city and state. Maybe you can actually point out the specific day of the week that a person reviews it, so on and so forth. So thank you so much for watching. I hope this was a useful tutorial for you. I will be sure to share this GitHub code along with the comments for each section. So I will comment this file out and put it out on GitHub. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something new with scraping Yelp reviews. I tried to make an improved video from what I did before, so I'm hoping that this one actually doesn't give any errors or any problems. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.